Welcome everyone to this webinar about upcycling, transforming waste into value. My name is Marloes Reining and I'll be your facilitator today. All right, what is the Regenerative Collaborative? Who are we? We are a non-profit organization focused on transforming our built environment into a regenerative one. We promote strategies and approaches that bring regenerative design and construction to life. We work collectively to inspire, educate, create awareness, and contextualize regenerative built environment approaches to the South African context. We make an effort to showcase local projects, local people, and local companies that are aligned with our goal, which is creating a regenerative future. You can find us on YouTube or all our previous webinars. You can find them there. So if you've missed one not available for CPD, we're still working on that, but all the recordings are on YouTube channel. You can follow us on our LinkedIn, our YouTube, or the Eventbrite, which is the registration platform. It really helps us if you follow us on any of these platforms or all three, just to communicate and to spread the message more effectively, and to collaborate with you guys, of course. We're still looking for volunteers. We have found somebody that's helping us with our social media, and she's building our new website. So that's really amazing, which we'll be showcasing next month. But if you have time to help us with admin or any other thing that you're good at, let us know. And as the name in our organization says, we'd like to collaborate and work together. Okay, but today we're speaking about upcycling and transforming waste into value. And we're going to start off by a presentation by our sponsor. We normally don't do this, but EWaste Africa, they're doing so many good things. So I was not going to be able to bring the message over very effectively. So with us, we have Mark Williams-Wayne. He's the CTO of EWaste Africa, and he's going to be presenting and telling us about EWaste Africa.
So I'm sure everyone's wondering why a waste management company is interested in sponsoring or being involved with an event about the built environment. And hopefully by the end of this short presentation, you'll understand a bit more about why we're so excited to be a part of this and what we are doing as a company. So we are an environmentally friendly electronic and lighting waste recycling company. So the big problem with e-waste is that it has this materials in it. And so e-waste comprises anything that uses electricity to operate. So for the built environment, that's very much your solar panels, your batteries, and even your lighting, your light bulbs, etc. And so all of these materials have hazardous components, or they use finite materials that need to be recycled and recovered to ensure that we kind of enter into a circular economy. And there's also legislated compliance. So I'm not sure, not many people know, but all e-waste, which includes lighting waste, is actually banned from landfill. And then there's also what's called extended producer responsibility, which makes producers of electronic equipment responsible for the end-of-life management of it. So they have targets that they have to meet. And so all of this means that there's a dire need for recycling of the e-waste, because it can't just be sent to landfill. And that's where we come in. November now is our 10-year anniversary. So we've been around for 10 years now. We started in Pietermaritzburg in KwaZulu-Natal, and we operated Africa's first light bulb recycling plant back 10 years ago. And since then, we have expanded into all electronic waste, and we are ISO accredited as well. And the big reason why we're excited to be a part of this program is because we are looking at the solar and making interlocking pavers from the solar panels that we recycle. We also are in the process of rolling out collection bins for e-waste at the Pick n Pay stores across the country. So the three major things that we look at is your light bulbs. So our plant can process upwards of 20 million light bulbs per year. And then e-waste in general, so that's anything else that uses electricity or a battery to operate. And then your PV modules. So we have a plant that we built that can process 20,000 PV modules per year, which is actually a small drop in the bucket of what is going to be expected or needed to be recycled. So this is just a brief overview of the different types, and just to give you an example of the types of e-waste that we recycle. But I actually want to focus on solar because this is the key reason why we are sponsoring this webinar and why we are interested in the built environment. So solar, there's about 25 million modules installed in South Africa, and that's across solar farms to individual households to industrial facilities. And the modules have a lifespan of somewhere between 5 and 30 years. This depends on the grade, depends on what the conditions they're exposed to, how they're handled, how they're installed, etc., etc. So Green Cape estimated that there are about 900 tons of PV waste that would be produced in 2024, and this will go up to 2,000 tons in 2026 and continue to grow upward to get up to, I think, by 2040s, you're looking at 40 to 50,000 tons of PV waste. And all of these are obviously banned from landfill. About 90% of the module is glass. The rest is aluminium frame, etc. And the glass is in a laminate, so it has the silicon layer sandwiched between either glass and 2 layers of glass or glass and plastic. So the reason I'm telling you about the glass is South Africa is a great food-grade glass recycler. Almost all of the food-grade glass that we produce in the country is recycled. Other types of glass we're not so good at, and that's anything from your soda float glass for windows, etc., to your shatterproof glass for vehicles or for windows, and then your glass from lighting waste and solar panels. And so with this lack of recycling, it means that glass from these sources is actually a problem. There's nothing to do with it. Most of it is ending up in landfills, which is obviously wasting landfill space. So at EWaste Africa, we have developed these pavers that we are manufacturing, which contain about 50% glass, or they replace about 50% of the virgin materials that would normally be used in an interlocking paver. And to date, we've recycled over 300 tons of PV modules. So I don't really understand what this compressive strength is, but this is the tests that we did on the pavers, and the pavers have a compressive strength of 10.5 MPa. My understanding is that is about the equivalent of what would be needed for a brick that you would be using to build a double-story house, but I'm sure the audience is better and more familiar with this, what this entails. So we are in the process of looking at Green Star or Green certification to enable these pavers to be used for Green Star buildings to give a sustainable green solution for these buildings. So our current plant in KZN can process around 500 tons per annum, and we are planning a plant for next year to open in Cape Town, and that will be able to process around 2,500 tons of solar panels a year. Some of the key reasons why we are in the e-waste business and are looking at recycling are the CO2 savings that we can generate through recycling and refurbishment of electronic equipment, as well as obviously diverting waste from landfill. And then there's also energy savings that can be achieved through recycling, because the products, say for example, let's say copper, if you are producing virgin copper, your energy use in the production process is significantly higher than if you are recycling it. And we are actually aiming to, by 2030, to get up to 10,000 tons of e-waste recycled, which will unlock up to 5,000 tons of CO2 emission reduction. Another important aspect and another important reason why we operate is job creation. So obviously South Africa needs jobs to be created. And at the moment we have 38 employees. We are aiming to get to 200 employees by 2030, and we believe that this is achievable because of the increase in the demand for recycling through the ban from landfill and EPR. So we have 3 facilities, 2 of which are licensed for the recycling of hazardous waste, the one in KwaZulu-Natal and the one in Gauteng. And then we recently opened a small facility in Cape Town, but we will be opening a larger facility in the coming months or the next year or so. So that's all from my side, and I hope that everyone enjoys this webinar.
Thanks, Mark. Don't you want to quickly tell us about the awards? Yes.
So yes, so that was I missed that. So last week we were actually the recipients of, well, the winners of the V&A Waterfront Circular Innovation Prize. So these pavers that we're producing were selected by the judges as a great example of circularity in producing new products. So we were very excited by that award, and it's something that showcases that these pavers are something that is going to be useful and are they're now award-winning pavers, should we say.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really amazing work what you guys are doing. So there's a quick question from James, which I'm going to allow because it was on my my lips as well. Do you sell your carbon credits that you generate?
We are working on that at the moment. So hopefully within the next few months, we will be able to sell those as well, which will also assist our customers by, obviously, if we can sell that side of thing, we can bring our pricing down, hopefully.
Yeah. Let me know when they're available. I have some projects that we can use them on. That would be great. Okay, so next, we've got two great speakers. Kevin Kimwelle. He's an accomplished architect whose career spans across Kenya, South Africa, and global collaborations in the US, Germany, and India. He's now based in South Africa, and his work is focusing on community development, using alternative design materials and technologies as powerful tools for social change. His doctoral research integrates environmental and socio-economic impacts through a multidisciplinary approach, partnering with academic institutions across Africa, Europe, and the US. His work is rooted in people-centered design, prioritizing social and environmental justice by combining business, environmental, and technical expertise to deliver affordable, sustainable solutions. He has gained wide recognition, including the 2017 Design in Davos, I don't know how to pronounce this abbreviation, Mboisa finalist, and in the 2018 SAPOA Award for the most transformational project in South Africa. Among other prestigious honors, his work has been featured in global publications like The Guardian, Architectural Record, and Metropolis magazine. And before I'm going to hand over to you, Kevin, I'm going to introduce Stephen as well. Our second speaker will be Stephen Pikus. Stephen, raised in Johannesburg, developed a love for hands-on work early on, often accompanied by his father, a contractor to building sites. Over a decade ago, Stephen and his wife, Samantha, and their firstborn, Talita, followed a calling to volunteer with an NGO in Limpopo. The NGO focused on community projects, including an orphanage, and Stephen was challenged to transform these spaces beautifully on a minimal budget. Through collaborations with talented artists, he discovered the joy and the art of turning one man's trash into another man's treasure. Today, Stephen is a dedicated designer, creating handmade light pieces from recycled materials, showcased globally. His work stands as a powerful testament to sustainability and his responsibility to protect our planet and precious resources. So I'm very excited to hear from you guys and to listen to your presentations. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to dive right into it. I think the topic of alternative design, obviously, which anchors on alternative materials and technology, is something that we in Africa have an upper edge on, and we have not yet really necessarily celebrated it ourselves or out there globally. And in the topic of circularity and sustainability, this is kind of the way to go. And my presentation will be looking at very simple interventions, moving to a slightly larger intervention with the idea of showcasing precedents that it is possible to actually reuse material, whether it's construction material or just recycled material through various ways. So I will start with the story of Customoko. So my friend Mundano in Brazil will say that waste speakers are superheroes with a what superpower, because they make our waste disappear but we never really appreciate them as much, especially in our African context. This is the story of Kusta. I met Kusta because some friends of mine had built him a pushcart which got hit by a truck, and the thing was just lying there in the on the road. And through engaging with him, and my first temptation, obviously, like any other designer or architect, is to build another one. But through a process of asset-based community mapping process, which is kind of an underlying methodology where you see a community or a person or an entity itself as an asset, I started following Kusta for about, I'd say about 6-8 months of just trying to understand who Kusta is. And I realized Kusta is actually a brocolier. A brocolier is someone who collects material. He uses that material to build his home. And then the recycled material, he puts it together. He uses it through an NGO for barter trade. So barter trade is essentially taking in the material, trading it for things like food, toiletries, shoes, etc., etc. But then for the actual money, he's a cobbler. He was a cobbler, and he used to repair bicycles. And really, by just following him and looking at him and trying to see his life differently, I really started seeing what his potential was, and especially because he'd already built his house and, he was doing something for himself. He was about 75 years old, and essentially by following him, I was surprised to realize that he had a partner who you can see at the back there. He had a partner. He also had a daughter. He had 2 dogs, Lion and Lady, and he had this system of collecting material between Monday and Friday and then taking it in for recycling. And then over the weekends, he was doing stuff like, he was entrepreneurial. And from that, the idea came of essentially using that very same skill that he has. Let me show you something very quickly. Switch my video. Sorry about this. So what we did is essentially went to a shop with him, and we bought 3 bicycles. And through the process of understanding what bicycles can do and realizing we actually don't need to reinvent something that was existing, we bought 2 children's bicycles and 1 adult bicycle, which we totally dismantled. And by the process of understanding, so this is the R&D part, essentially, understanding what these components can do, we built him 2 waste carts. The one waste cart could go in through the township because the challenge there is it's very narrow spaces. And we branded it under his name, and we tested it. So this is about 900 wide and about 1.5, 1.4 long, and we tested it so that it could go through the township. And the story about it is essentially not only were we thinking about the challenge of collecting material and moving through the township and all, but we realized we were also creating an identity for him because people started realizing who he was, and people started appreciating the work that he did. And for example, this waste bike, as I said, these are secondhand bicycles that we bought from the pawn shops. And this bike here, actually, the interesting thing about it, he chose this bicycle. I was thinking maybe a mountain bike, would be great and all, but he chose this bicycle, and we respected that. And the second half of it is waste from the motor car industry, in particular, Isuzu Motors. So we recreated this collection part of it at the back, with waste material. So the idea is essentially reusing waste to create new value, new possibilities, and new opportunity. So that's the story of Kusta Moko. And this is understanding Kusta himself, the waste collector, as an asset. So the idea is essentially understanding a waste speaker and the challenges that he undergoes, and really building up the design centered around him, and really seeing him as a core part of the co-creation collaboration process, and together with him, uplifting him, and the part of the R&D and the, the science and the architecture and engineering literally plugs in. So it's a very collaborative, very co-creative process. And in the process, we created something that was of different value. Suddenly, the problem of people hitting his waste bike changed because they could see him. Obviously, the problem there was visibility. It's not a vehicle. Suddenly, we put something with lights. We put a number plate, added the value. There was a change in perception of that very same waste that people see. I'm going to move to a slightly larger scale project, and this is a story of Gogo Selena. I call her the forgotten generation because she's about 80, 85 years old. This structure at the back here, the one I'm pointing at, was from the files that we could pull in the municipality, was built around 1949, and she's lived in it since about 1954, you know, and this is the space she was in. Anyway, we were called, surprisingly, by the actual community because they were a little bit embarrassed because this structure was collapsing. Essentially, the roof was collapsing underneath this lady, and they told us to simply fix the ceiling. However, on assessment of the structure, we realized that this roof here was actually structurally failing, and us fixing the ceiling would not solve the problem. So we ended up building them an entire new project, new home. And the drive there was because we realized there was a little girl. She was about 16 years old then. This is Michelle, and she was taking care of her grandmother. And this very little space, she was studying next to the cooking space, etc., etc. And anyway, this is one of those projects. Our hearts jumped over the fence, and then our bodies were dragged in through the fence, and we got all the stakeholders and partners and everybody to rally behind this project. In this particular project, we recycled collapsible shipping containers from the motor car industry. So Japan has this collapsible shipping container system, which you flat pack, as opposed to the old traditional shipping containers, you know, the ones that are shipped from country to country or from continent to continent. And it's very effective because everything essentially gets flat packed and can be recycled. In this case, we dismantled this collapsible shipping containers, and we took the wood and we laminated them, and we created these structures that you're seeing here. So the structural columns and beams and everything from this recycled wood. And then we use the collapsible shipping containers themselves as a skin surrounding the building to protect the vulnerable inside of the building. Then COVID hit. So this was at the end of 2020 is when we began the project. And suddenly we had restrictions and we could only be 5 people on site. And as you remember, COVID was like a whole 6 months of just craziness, essentially. And we had to protect Gogos. We had to think about the number of people who were going to site. We had to get everybody vaccinated, especially the ones going to site, and continue with this project. This is Gogo there inspecting the building, wondering what we were doing. And like the entire community, in fact, when we started building this project, the community was asking, why are you building another shack for Gogo? And we told them, just have a wait, be patient, you'll see what we build. Anyway, so this is the complete structure that you can see here. And the entire thing is made from recycled material. And it's a beautiful structure. And just seeing the smile of Gogo and her and Michelle is so much rewarding. Incidentally, actually, Michelle now is a university student. She's doing her BTech in IT, and just seeing that change of life, you know, from this structure, which is about 80% recycled. This is a bit of an anatomy of the building, but I will not get into it. I know there are a couple of architects, but essentially we protected the very vulnerable part of the building, which is from this laminated recycled pine, and we put the collapsible shipping containers on the outside, and then in the inside we used another recycled material, which is formed from stripped cargo containers, you know, the refrigerator containers, to create a thermal insulated building. For Joe Slovo community, we tracked the material that they were using to build shacks. So this, you know, in the peri-urban spaces, we have a lot of these communities in transition. Communities in transitions are essentially communities that are waiting around DP house or formalization of sorts. Anyway, in this community, we built a community hall or a multi-purpose facility that could be used for multiple things: weddings, funerals, political events. But Monday to Friday, this space was used as a creche, and then once a month there was a mobile clinic, etc., etc. Anyway, the material that we chose to use, again from an asset-based community mapping process, was pallets, wine bottles, and wood that the community had access. So this is Port Elizabeth, and this is a peri-urban community, and we tracked the material that they were getting. So we knew where they were getting the pallets, we knew where they were getting the boards, and we used that very same material through to create, through R&D, a multi-purpose hall. What we did is we raised up the hall so that the building was not vulnerable to water. Remember, at this stage, there's no roads, there's no services in this community. Then we realized that the most vulnerable part of this building was the bottom section, because when there's splashing of water against the ground, that area gets messy, dirty, and the water seeps upwards. So through a cavity wall system, an outer wall layer, an inside layer, plastic in between, and then raising up the building and creating cross ventilation. These are all, architectural things, especially on passive architecture. And then alcoholism in these communities is very high. We know why. You can imagine living in a township, you will be tempted to suppress your feelings through alcohol. So we took a very simple material, which is wine bottles, and we recreated this wall. This is when it's used as a crash. I'll skip the slide. And we created a wall out of 2,500 wine bottles. The image you're looking at was the finals from Boisa 2017. And I love this image because it's a refinement of the design, which was the wine bottles, which is architecture and engineering to make them stand, and the lady who was running the crash, and just the balance between architecture in this image that kind of tells the story behind the airport. For the Alliance Française of Port Elizabeth, now we are in the CBD, so recycled material is not just for poor people, as many people might think. For the festival, Fête de la Musique, we decided we're going to take the green agenda to the front, but we needed to do it in a subtle way that was engaging. So the festival itself, the announcement was this poster whose background is a palette. All the furniture for the festival, the street festival, which is an open festival, was from recycled material. So you can see the benches and the seats and everything else there. And over here, you can see this structure, which is a bar, is made up from paper tubes. So we collected paper tubes into room, and we cut them up to create this screen, which is the backdrop for the main screen of the event. What you're looking at essentially is paper tubes, creating a screen with an effect, with lights and everything, and just to see us being able to activate as citizens, who are coming to look at this paper tube structure and engage with it and test it, and the questions that came out of it. Anyway, my last project is on the waterfront in Cape Town. The challenge here was to create a building from a net zero building, from carbon point of view and from net zero landfill. So through working on about 9 demolition sites, we were able to collect and recycle various materials and reuse them in the building. So you can see where, for example, we had 3 sites where we got roof sheets, wine bottles, which is our thing at the moment, and then bricks, concrete graded, etc. But what we also did is we marked our distance, and that's why it had to be within this precinct to create the desired net zero carbon. And we reused this. We created an inventory or a library, so we knew what was in our library. And then from a design point of view, we actually included a design of a garden. So the design is a cafeteria, food pavilion, as we call it. But the design was to link food production into circularity and the whole move. Essentially, there's a garden next door, which we hope to use to grow spices, which then fit into the cafe. So these are renders of the cafeteria. I'll play a video shortly, but this design was, we essentially pumped all the lessons from everything we've done into it. So besides us, we're using 98% recycled material, but we took all the other lessons, the paper tube to create this light filter, the wine bottle wall you can see over there, the windows and the doors. We crushed concrete and we were able to reuse concrete. In fact, for this concrete, we reused glass from shutterproof glass, essentially. Instead of mining virgin sand, the idea was to use crushed glass, and we created different strengths of concrete, ranging from about 14-15 MPa to about 40 MPa, and then we used it in different ways according to what we designed. A big culprit in landfill is, especially considering that about 40% of waste going into landfill used to be about from construction demolition waste, essentially. Gypsum is a big culprit because wherever gypsum lands, nothing grows. So what we did in this case is we figured out a way of taking the paper out. So it's a very laborious process. We take out the paper, we sort the sheets, and then we're able to reuse the gypsum in various finishes be it from a beauty aspect or from a, what is it called, from ceiling pointing and all that. So we are reusing essentially waste that is a big problem and challenge. Obviously, because of that, I have been speaking to, I spoke in the 2022 Green Building Council. I was able to speak in one of them as a motivator for entrepreneurial activities for the TEDx Cape Town. And of course, I think a part of this work speaks to activism and design or architecture for activism. And this is why we were part of the COP27 in Egypt. The idea of, activism in architecture and thinking about vulnerable communities, but also laying that conversation square. And as this is an architecture that is, and the design interpretation and use is, the use is limitless, essentially. This is a Construct 2024 this year. Even before we finished the building, it had already been nominated for an award. And it was one of only 3 buildings, so it's purely by nomination. You have to meet a very high criteria within sustainability. I'm going to play a short video to wrap up my presentation, and we got featured in CNN.
I think that African cities have insights and lessons to teach the continent, but also perhaps to teach the world as well.
In this week's Inside Africa, we travel to 3 iconic cities on the continent: Nairobi, Cape Town, and Lagos.
As African cities, the greatest strengths at the heart of these cities is in fact the people and their knowledge and their tenacity.
These are Africa's next-gen cities. This is Inside Africa.
Most African cities are predominantly informal, and that gives it a very unique character and set of logics. Most Africans are hustling all the time, and they are hustling in terms of trying to put food on the table, but also to get their kids educated and to access water and energy services and so forth. Now, within that, there is a form of intelligence. There's a capacity to innovate, to continuously adapt.
We're sitting in a time where we can be completely imaginative as to what we want an urban environment or a city, an African city, to look like. We can leapfrog whatever is tying us to some kind of problematic past, problematic infrastructure, way of being, and we can literally move into a future where anything is possible. We have everything from net zero buildings to buildings built completely out of natural materials. There's a upswell of people who are experimenting with different ways of looking at how we build our built environment.
Portswood Cafe, located at Cape Town's V&A Waterfront, is one of South Africa's first net zero buildings. The project was led by Kenyan community architect Kevin Kimwelle.
Net zero waste building essentially means the building itself in its building process emits zero waste. No waste goes into landfill. It's a very big milestone because essentially this building is made up of about 98% recycled material from within this precinct. It's been 3 years in the making, so that's how thorough and detailed we've been in trying to produce a very circular building.
Everything from the bricks to the wood, steel, and even the glass bottles were all recycled or upcycled.
For a very long time, I think we in Africa did not realize or were not appreciated in terms of the design authenticity we have or approach to circularity and sustainability, etc. Yet it is the future because we are able to recycle demolition waste, recycle actually anything to its death, you know. You do not need to preach to anyone in the rural setup or in poor Africa on how to recycle because it's just a knowledge we already have.
Now Kevin's applying this age-old method to prime African real estate, but it's not limited to this market alone.
This building involves various communities within Cape Town, and we employed labor specifically from the township so that we could be able to employ people from the community to come work here. You can imagine about the socio-economic, the livelihood, the impact, but beyond that, the excess material that we had accumulated here ended up creating a different project, the Langa Agri-Hub project, to support farmers. So that's the work I do, and you have an idea of it and its impact in community. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kevin. That's awesome projects. I've got a list of questions. So, but we're first going to go and have Stephen present on his exquisite light fixtures.
Thank you.
Fittings.
Yeah, I don't have slides. I'm not too used to this platform. We usually meet on Teams and that, but I thought for me just to give a background of where we started, how all of this started. In a very small nutshell, I grew up in Johannesburg. My father was a builder, as you mentioned earlier. For pocket money as a kid, I used to go and paint door frames and walls for extra money. And jump years later, I left Johannesburg when I was about 20 years old, and I volunteered to go and work as a volunteer in an NGO that was based in Tzaneen in Limpopo province, quite near Machubaskloof, very beautiful area. And it was run very much like a kibbutz. We had different departments, different projects. So I joined a team of creatives. There were 2 artists, some carpenters, metal workers, and I learned many skills. I learned to do paint techniques, mosaic. We used to go and get old tiles from the CTM and do beautiful mosaic projects. And yeah, I was up there for about 8 years. And after 8 years, I felt the call of the city back again. So I went back to Johannesburg for 4 years. In that time, I met my wife. We got married, and when my firstborn was 9 months old, we just decided to pack up and go back to the farm. It was on a beautiful farm, and I just thought it's so wonderful for my daughter to grow up barefoot, climbing trees, and so we did that. And immediately, again, I slotted back into what I was doing before. So it was run very much, it was an NGO. We had an orphanage by that time. An orphanage had sprung up on the property, and we just did various community projects as well. And yeah, so organically, we almost found like an interior decorating design business where we would go into some of the farms. Families had been there for generations and repaint furniture. You know, they have this like heirloom furniture, stuff that had been handed down by parents and grandparents. So they didn't want to get rid of it, but it was quite old fashioned. So we would paint and do all sorts of things like that. And yeah, also I used to go to the scrapyard and to the rubbish dump, because I figured out that we could find old things there that people throw away. And we started to fix them up and paint them and kind of upcycle them. So this is about 20 years ago. I didn't even know what upcycling really was. I'd love to say that I started doing it out of a deep, innate sense of wanting to do good for the environment. Initially, it wasn't that. It was purely economics. We had no money. And that was the beginning. And as we progressed, I really fell in love with the process, like we said earlier, of turning something that's trash into a treasure. And yeah, it was somehow around about this time, we were going down to Jeffreys Bay, and we were driving down, and the sun was coming up one morning. We were in the Karoo, and I saw an air filter from a diesel truck sticking out of the bin. And I thought, wow, this will make a beautiful lamp. But I didn't even know what it was. So I just took it along with me. Yeah, and I started fiddling with it. And yeah, maybe a few months later, Eskom used to run a lighting design competition every 2 years. And friends of mine encouraged me to enter it. So I did. And miraculously, we won. Yeah, so like, I mean, we were living... we were volunteers, so we didn't really have money or anything. And we were feeling it was time to move on and go back to Joburg. By this time, we'd had our second daughter. And so this competition, it's actually a year ago, I think might even be today. Not a year ago, 2014, yeah. Yeah, it was 2014 on my birthday. My birthday was yesterday, the 29th, by the way, 2 days ago. And so we kind of won enough money to move back to Joburg. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I've been literally now off the grid for 8 years, then back for 4, and now off the grid again for 7 years. I had no credit rating. I don't even think I had a cell phone. And fortunately, my wife got a job, and I used to drop her at work. I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I used to go into paint shops and do paint techniques on the walls, hoping to get business from that. And then another competition. Black & Decker were running a competition in conjunction with, there used to be a show called Grand Designs that was at the Dome. And one of the prizes was a night at the Fire and Ice Hotel in Melrose Arch. It was valued at 10,000 Rand and a 10,000 Rand voucher for tools. And we won it, actually. So, you know, at that time, the fridge wasn't very stocked with food, and I just couldn't bring myself to go and stay at a hotel like that for that much money. So I asked them if they would mind maybe increasing the tool price. So they actually gave me a 25,000 Rand voucher for tools, which we still use today, some of them. And that's why we actually we have a range of light fixtures made out of glass, recycled glass, and we call them Fire and Ice, kind of just because of that. And then another part of it was that I could, for a very low rate, I could get a stand at this Grand Designs. And I knew nothing about this industry. All I knew is I like to make things. I mean, I'd swapped. I don't think I'd ever sold a light, but I'd swapped friends for art. And I thought, well, let's just do it. So I found some wooden shipping crates at a friend of mine's workshop. I stood them upright, did a paint technique on them, and hung my lights in there. And I remember it like yesterday. I was setting up and I was looking at all these people around me, and I thought, who is going to buy this rubbish? Like, honestly, that's what I thought. And it was amazing. I mean, we made our first few sales. There was a trade expo a week or two later, and some of the interior designers came and they said, oh, wow, we haven't seen stuff like this before. Please, can we use some of it in the public spaces, and we'll give you a free stand. And that's kind of how it evolved. I didn't know this industry. And yeah, so we started doing some really nice projects, and found a distributor in America, actually, quite miraculous here. And I think what's a good idea, we made a very short video back then. When I look at this video, I see how empty our workshop was. It was like right in the beginning. So maybe it would be nice to play that, and then you could just kind of get an idea a little bit better.
We love to make treasure from trash. I started to go to the scrapyards, the rubbish dumps, looking for items to upcycle. I think out of that came the love for making something out of nothing. My name is Piekus. I'm a lighting designer from Johannesburg, South Africa. Maybe it was even just a picture of my life personally, where maybe I wasn't going anywhere and suddenly it was a mess and chaotic, and you could make something beautiful out of that chaos. But maybe that's what drew me to it. It's a beautiful story for us. We love what we do, and we love more than just the product, but we love the story behind the product. This whole thing has evolved. It's not just my life that's changed, but it's many people's lives. There's so much out there. So if I were to cap it all, I would say the materials pick us. We didn't choose them.
Yeah, so that's in a nutshell of how it started and some of the materials we used. I think a lot of the challenges we faced at the beginning was twofold. It was finding enough waste materials, especially of air filters, stuff like that. And then also to kind of really try and make a difference. You know, Kevin touched on it earlier as far as job creation. I mean, that's something that is so needed in South Africa. And, you know, we found ourselves in a very fortunate place where everything we do is handmade. You can't make it in a machine. So it gave us the opportunity to really make a difference socially as well. So in the beginning, we got involved. There was an organization that used to feed, I think it used to feed about 3,000 people that were on the streets in the Boksburg area, where a lot of them were substance abuse and stuff like that. And I mean, I knew a little bit of that from our past, from growing up. One of the reasons I left Joburg to go to Zenith. So we got involved with these guys. They worked with us for about 6 months, but you know, I think a lot of it's very tricky. It's very tricky because, like, we would buy a whole roll of copper wire. The next thing, the guys are taking little balls and selling them to the scrapyard, and then we somehow beautifully found our way to another organization that was very involved in learnership programs and internship programs like the YES program. And I think to date, we've probably had over 200 learners through our doors that have passed through for learnerships, usually a year-long period. And 80% of the team, we're not a massive team, but we're 18 people. We manufacture in Johannesburg, in Modderfontein. And 80% of the guys are young guys and girls that have, usually, most of them, it's their first job. And that kind of took that year-long internship seriously and built on it, you know. And I think a lot of the other issue, as I've touched on, was also raw materials. So in the beginning, like with the air filters, I would go to, oh man, I can't tell you how many skips I've climbed in and out of trying to find filters, and usually they damaged and really badly dented. But yeah, somehow there was one, I mean, we've worked with companies like Volvo and all of that, but Volvo was the one, Volvo Trucks was the one that really, the minute I spoke to the marketing director, they were on board, they loved what we did. And even to date, we've done 2 projects for them, big projects. The one was a year ago at their head office in Gothenburg in Sweden. Just to, you know, it's amazing. Like, there's their waste product hanging in the reception, there's a cluster of our air filter lights hanging over the CEO's boardroom table in his office. I mean, it's just amazing. And just to, yeah, maybe we could end with, because there's another little video that we made, just a short edit. It's 1 minute that we made for this project in Sweden. But yeah, maybe we could play that and kind of close with that, if that's cool.
Towards the end of last year, we did a little bit of a calculation, and we have collected around 30 tons of items that we will upcycle and make into light fixtures going forward. We love the process of turning trash to treasure. One of the pivotal supporters and people that got what we were doing from the beginning was Volvo. My relationship and my journey started with them quite organically, where I entered a lighting design competition at the end of 2014, and I decided to make a fixture out of used air filters from trucks. Jump years later, one of the biggest struggles was to find stock of used filters. You know, to make a commercial product, you need to have more than just one, so not everything can be custom like one of this size. And eventually managed to get into Volvo, and they welcomed us with open arms.
wonderful to work with people that see and have vision for a small business, something very creative. I know that there's nobody else doing what we're doing, definitely not with waste on a scale that we're doing it. We value our relationship with them very much.
Such a beautiful story, Stephen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing, and you know, even just the whole thing of what's been spoken numerous times, collaboration. Collaboration is everything, you know. I mean, you might think that you look at something and think, oh, wow, I've got such a good idea, but you forget that maybe somebody a little while ago said something that triggered you on a thought here, and then something else came here, and that's really an indirect collaboration. And even with people, I mean, you know, there's no way we would have been able to do where we are today without the incredible team that we have. I mean, we've got the most amazing team. We're a family where we work, you know. And yeah, I mean, even if there's new people that want to join, it's not even me that does the interview. Like, they speak to the team. Team says yes, they can come, or maybe we should give it a miss. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for the time and listening to me.
No, thank you for sharing your story with us, and same for Kevin. It's an amazing project you guys worked on. I am going to open the floor to everyone. So if you want to ask a question, you can put up your hand. Kevin, I had a question for you. I was wondering how do you select your projects, and how do you get the funding to do them? Because even though it's all recycled materials, I'm sure there is cost involved with building it. And my other question was, do you include a lot of volunteers in the building process, or do you train a lot of people? And what is sort of their response to working with waste, basically?
All right. So funding, we use multiple approach. It differs from project to project. Some projects are small that can be sponsored by one corporate entity that chooses the project for their CSR or CSI. Gradually, that has changed now into the ESGs. So bigger corporates now want to get involved in the ESG space, and obviously this is a way to get involved. I've done crowdfunding on social platforms in Europe and the States. I mean, it's anything essentially where you can find a center to be able to support a project, including the universities. I think the one I've been fortunate just to be able to leverage the academic part of it and get R&D. The R&D really supports, especially because of the kind of assurances that the professional consultant team requires. You know, if you're building a building out of recycled material, you kind of build the beams and columns right at the workshop yourself. The structural engineers need certain tests to be done, and you know, this is where the educational component of the university really comes in place. But eventually, we also do test those in the required laboratories for things like concrete strengths. You know, so we obviously do the R&D in the university, and then get the industry to test these materials, and then we get our results, which is really great in terms of showcasing, yes, it's doable. It's been a journey, gradually moving from very small projects. I mean, I've shown you about 3. We've done about 15 on every time we try to push the boundary further. So I kind of showed you the simplest one being a waste bicycle. We've done multiple workshops. We've done almost commercial, simple, conventional buildings into this last one. So your first question was on funding. That's it. The second question was on training and community engagement. It varies. Some projects we have volunteers, and the volunteers could be from the community, could be from the wider community in terms of citizens, especially, you know, like when you want to unlock active citizenship. A festival, for example, is a good project to do, you know. So with the Alliance Francaise, that was a campaign towards getting everyone involved, rallied behind the idea of recycling. And we worked with very simple basic material that we realized we wouldn't have such big issues from indemnity or insurance point of view, and that was paper. hence the paper tube choice. However, as you get more complex into the build industry, when you're building a building, it starts changing very quickly. And what I mean by that is the R&D can be done at the university or laboratories, etc., but the actual building requires skilled workmen. And this is where we go into the communities and very quickly start identifying possible skilled people who don't have perhaps the correct certification or don't have certification but are crafted. And because they're not educated or they don't have that certification, they can't they're not allowed in these spaces. So what we do is then stand in the gap, and we're able to source them, sustain their training, and maybe up it a bit, and then involve them in the building. For example, with the waterfront building, I was very adamant in going to Kailicha, into Langa, and through a very laborious process, which at times your client starts getting tired of. But the social impact story is really important, and this is the space where these communities can really come into play. With the high-tech stuff, as Stephen mentioned, that space is kind of dominated by robotics, and our communities cannot compete with that. But with handcrafted stuff right into buildings, this is where we can really pull communities and create livelihoods for them, and be very intentional about it. Bring them in, get them certified, get them into the building sites, and to the point where they're able to create their own businesses. If you look at the larger scale of things, the larger picture, essentially, what we're saying is that in Africa, where we have a high employment and youth that are unemployed, by going this route, by looking at low tech, low, not LOW, but LO tech, this kind of architecture, this very crafted kind of product design, be it from lighting into architecture, into furniture, is really where we can push for ingenuity from an African perspective, that we are able to create our own economies. We talk about township economies and all these informal economies, and this is a space where it's kind of a hybrid, right? One foot is kind of formal in the sense that you eventually do have to get it to the marketplace, but the production process is where we can really thrive in and create a larger impact.
Great, awesome. There's a hand from Jackie, and Francois, I'm going to put you on the spot as well to unmute you after Jackie.
Sorry, this is a very architectural question, but Kevin, it's a question for you. When you're doing your zero waste buildings, what sort of material are you using to create your floor surfaces?
It varies. So Gogo Selina's house, that was a floor that came off a demolished building. Isuzu had taken over from GM, and they were redoing a couple of buildings, and this floor had been stripped, and they were about to throw it away when I found it. So I pulled it into the building. We've done floors from crushed concrete for the V&A. Gogo Selina's house actually uses a hybrid system. So it's a steel floor from the steel system from the collapsible shipping containers, and then we put the TNG wood to it, the flooring to it. We've done another floor, a section of the V&A cafe has crushed glass that we use as a substitute to sand. And then what you do is you polish it, and it has a glitter. It creates a very beautiful floor, actually. So the floors vary. Currently, I'm looking at a building in Kenya that we will probably, so I'm trying to work with the nature-based material, and we found that coconut husks, so we're looking at crushing that, taking out the fiber and using it in a, we call them nature stroke bio-based floors, So it's clay with a bit of a clay and sand and low carbon cement in it. So I guess to answer your question, it depends with what is accessible. It's about just experimenting with it and finding out if it can produce the aesthetics and the performance from a building point of view that you're looking for.
Thank you very much.
Francois?
Thanks, Marlies. Yeah, so I guess my question is to speakers or anyone else on the call, really, around the network of linking useful materials from the point of, demolition or refurbishment to new projects, and whether there's any good work being done in that space, in that network, in terms of NGOs or marketplaces. For example, we're working on a large hospitality refurb, and there's such potential of high value, material going out of there, and finding a new home for that material can be challenging. So I'm looking for any tips on drawing those links. Yeah.
Stephen, you want to go first, or Kevin?
I'm gonna let Stephen go first.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't found a kind of organized network like that. For us, it's a little bit different. We, like for instance, with Volvo, I mean, I use them as an example, but I've walked in there before just to go and greet everybody, and then suddenly we see a pile of these big plastic cooling fans. And even at the moment, like, I don't really know what we could do with them, but I know we could do something. So then we just start collecting, and then like put it on a counter and walk past it, and eventually kind of falls into place. I mean, I would love to see the list of what you've got that you'd like to somehow do something else with, because kind of that's our design process. We don't design anything from scratch. We kind of start with a waste product and work it backwards. So that's pretty much my take. Yeah.
My experience has been in South Africa and in Africa. At the moment, we don't have very organized networks in terms of being able to access and place these in places. But the intention is there. I say that because the subject and the topic is becoming much more to the forefront. And with a platform like this, where we can talk about it and encourage others to do so. I think for me, in the waterfront project, that was a really once-off, in the sense that we were able to go to 9 demolition sites, and we could pick thermal insulation over their roof, of a roof sheeting from this side, etc., and kind of bring it together. But what it did is it created a precedent, and we're still going through all that, and we're going through an audit, so it might be a little bit early to speak about it. But what it kind of projected and showed is that it is possible for us to think beyond just demolition companies. Imagine a big warehouse where various materials from demolition sites are kind of placed. Presently, demolition warehouses are just kind of materials brought in and you walk in, out, But imagine if we use, for example, the European precedent of it, which is, I say that because I've been based in Berlin for this year, and they have libraries of this information where other architects and other professional consultants can actually click on a website and pull it out. So I'm really curious what the African version of that could be. I say that because South Africa is kind of one of the advanced economies in Africa. If you go to Nairobi or one of these Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Zambia, Lusaka, it's the other way around. But there's a system, at the back streets, there's doors and windows, and we kind of can put that together and reuse it. So back to you, Francois, like Stephen said, I mean, the easiest way for us to get involved is tell us what material there is, and we see how we can plug those in and encourage others into recycling and reusing them. In architecture, it's a little bit difficult just because most of the clients want certain assurances and guarantees and things like that. So you really have to get a client who's also willing to accept that the fact that the door is recycled or reused, and it will not have his 5-year guarantee or 2-year guarantee, etc., etc. So that's a conversation that we have with our end users or clients, because at times the client and the end user is different, and we're able to incorporate this in this material. Sorry, thank you.
Great, thanks, guys.
Thanks. Any other questions from the audience? Otherwise, in the meantime, I have a question for Stephen. Where are sort of the countries where your light fittings are featured? Because I know there are, like, if I go to Olives and Plates, I know that they're there. I know that one of my clients at Legaro, but also the picture in your background, a large, where did all your fittings end up? And because you're now worldwide recognized.
Yeah, well, that one, the one that's here in my picture was, as I mentioned earlier to you, I think you might have even been there, to the lodge. It's one of the gorilla lodges in Rwanda. Beautiful. So we've done work there. We've done quite a lot of work in the States. We've exhibited at Design Week in New York 3 times. So we've picked up quite a bit of work from there. Europe, I don't know, various lodges. We're busy with a project in Botswana now. We have to install before the end of the year. Australia. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Did you think it was gonna turn out this way when you started finding these filters?
Not in a million years.
It's yeah, it's a very good news story. From Luze, for both of you, have you faced any compliance challenges?
Yeah, we have, especially because we deal with lighting. So there's an electrical component to it. So yeah, we actually moving more and more away from actual normal sockets and moving more towards low voltage LED strip. I mean, we use low voltage bulbs anyway, but yeah, to the States, to America, because there's a UL certification, we actually just send the fittings. We send it as a glass sculpture, and it gets lamped there.
Okay.
And yeah, actually our pendants as well. So kind of that's the way around it. That yeah, but I think it's really that because there's an electrical component in it. It's not the same as exporting a scatter cushion, you know. So you have to have everything in place. You have to have your documentation. Yeah.
From my end, compliance is actually the big hesitance or resistance to in building, just because obviously a building is a high risk structure. If it collapses, it's a big problem. So right from the red tape of fire in buildings all the way to structural components, thermal insulation, etc., the performance, eventually into the electrical components and the plumbing and drainage. And what we realized is it's actually we've reversed our system. So we've reverse engineered how we do buildings by starting the conversation with that. Before I even get any design going, I try to incorporate the city. And you know, in Port Elizabeth, if I walk into the council, they're already like, okay, what now? What's the next building? What do you want us to do this time? But it's funny because by so doing, the city, be it the development agency or be it the municipality or be it the fire engineer, becomes a co-creator of the solution that will come into place, and really taking down those red tape by understanding what the challenge is and rationalizing that challenge into a way of being able to meet that design challenge. And to make a material perform like they want. So, and what I mean by that is, if fire is the issue, then what is a fire plan? What is our fire plan to it? You know, and we really go through all the materials, and we started create. For the V&A Kiosk, for example, that was the biggest challenge, and we had to spend time really rationalizing and getting a layout that mitigated the risk. And one of the approaches we used then was we created a firebox. So we realized because fire was the issue, the kitchen in this design is literally a box that can be sealed, and we just get rid of, we solve the problem. Otherwise, trying to go through the whole idea of every component being fire rated is just impossible. So really going through these discussions with the municipality, and then taking it to the professional consultants, our M&E, structural engineers, our QS, in terms of understanding what those costs are, because eventually it does come to a cost, right? And so the design process of this, and that's what I meant by reverse engineering, the design process is different. And eventually it does have to come to a client who has to decide, because we're using these materials, what does it mean for his insurance? You know, is he able to insure the building differently? How does the professional consultant team consider the insurance from an indemnity point? So there's a lot of layers to that, and that whole process is essentially reverse engineered by starting at the problem and then eventually coming into the design. And I think because our heart and the design component is really our strong point, and we understand the material as well, we can accelerate the design process eventually into a building.
Wow, that is, I guess that's one of the biggest challenges, to change the design process. Or that's one of the biggest challenges we're always facing, like everything goes as it's planned, and this really requires you to change that thinking and not following the the usual steps.
Yes, because the frustration actually is if you do a design and then only later on consider the material, there's a very high likelihood it will be too late and it will be thrown out very quickly, and you don't have the time to start motivating for it, etc., etc. So we learned that the hard way. So we decided, okay, we're gonna just start at the end of it and then move backwards.
Okay. From Mike, for Stephen, on the use of air and oil filters, how do you manage the residual waste materials that are typically classified as hazardous, and how do you remove them from the product?
Yeah, there's various companies that we use to actually get rid of mainly the paper from the air filters, because it has grease, it has a residue of diesel in it and whatever else. Most of the oil filters we've used to date, a filter has an expiry date, and those cannot get back into the market. So up till now, the oil filters are still relatively new. And we've just got so many. We've got pallets full of expired oil filters that that have never been used. They've just reached an expiry date.
Sure.
But we actually we've been working on it for quite a while. A very exciting end of life product for the paper as well, which can't really talk about, but it would close the cycle completely. It would completely close the circle, which is very exciting for us.
Awesome. And then the last question I'm going to ask before I'm going to wrap up, Kevin, can we visit the Portswood Cafe, or is it only available to BP staff?
So there's a change of ownership, because that property has, that used to be the Merchant House, used to be the V&A headquarters. And then the V&A has moved out, and that space is now being rented by others. So I'm presently not in South Africa, but if I understand correctly, there's a new user and there's a new operator of the space. So they're in that process of getting a new operator who will run that facility. Last I checked, they were still in the process of getting the new operator, new, furniture, which should be recycled, and things like that to get the cafe running. I can check on it, but I assume that because it's in the public domain, literally the kiosk is part of the urban precinct. You should be able to walk past it. If it's open, go in. If it's not open, just walk around it. It's okay still.
Great. I'm gonna check it out tomorrow. I'm flying to Cape Town, so I'm gonna go on a walking trip.
Sure.
Great. Before we go, Kevin, Stephen, do you want to maybe quickly run us through where people can find you? What are the best social media networks? What is in for the future? What should we be looking out for?
Well, we're most active on Instagram. Our website is horrendous. It's about to go under a huge facelift. But yeah, mostly on Instagram. We actually do have a showroom in the most gorgeous old heritage house in an area called Chelsea Village in Cape Town. So if you're in Cape Town, pop in and come. We're still busy renovating, but yeah, mainly those two channels.
Oh, well.
For me, LinkedIn is my best place to connect, just because I got bombarded with so many requests from community spaces. So I'm not big with social media. I have Instagram, but the best is just LinkedIn, because the work I'm doing essentially needs a client who is committed, etc., etc. So if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I will definitely respond to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, let me wrap up the webinar. We've got some events coming up. Next month, we're going to have a 50th anniversary webinar special. We're going to invite a couple of people back to to the webinar and have them talk about how their regenerative future looks like. So, and we've got some prizes to give away for some people that have been following us and our webinars for a long time. And in January, we're also going to have a very interesting webinar. It's going to be titled Invasive to Innovation, and we're going to look at how alien vegetation have transformed into innovative products. So we have 2 local examples. So that's also going to be very interesting. So this is for next month. It's titled The Regenerative Future. And we're going to launch our new website for the Regenerative Collaborative. And we're also going to launch a new branding for our webinars coming up. So hope you're going to join us next month. A very big thank you to our speakers today. Super inspirational projects. You guys are doing such great work, and wish you all the best in the future. And I hope this webinar contributes a little bit to your success going forward.
Thank you so much.
Great. Also, a very special thanks to our sponsor and EWaste Africa. I know that Mark dropped off a little bit earlier, but yeah, I really appreciate your contribution to this webinar and making this possible. It really, really helps us to continue with this monthly webinar. And then our usual call, if anybody's out there and wants to sponsor one of these webinars or arrange a webinars, let us know. Or if you know some angel investors or big corporates that don't know how to spend their ESG money, we are definitely open for donations. It would be great. And then lastly, follow us on our YouTube, Eventbrite, and LinkedIn channels. This is where you can find us and follow us. Yeah, and if you want to join us as a volunteer, just drop us an email, a message, and we'll get back to you. And that's it for today. Thank you very much. Again, Stephen, Kevin, and Mark for your attendance, for your sharing your stories, and I really enjoyed this today. Have a great evening, and I hope to see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.